The alarm bells rang through the Galactic Council chambers like the cries of dying stars. Hyun-woo pressed his translator device closer to his ear as the emergency signal filled the massive hall with its horrible sound. Around him, hundreds of alien beings from across the galaxy stopped their talks and turned toward the main communication screen. The image that appeared made even the bravest council members step back in fear. A Vellani officer, his blue skin covered in burns and his 4 eyes wide with terror, stared out at them from what looked like the bridge of a dying ship. Behind him, sparks flew from broken machines and the screams of his crew could be heard. Over the crackling static, "Please," the Vellani officer begged, his voice breaking. "Anyone who can hear this message. Our world is dying. The Ravak Empire has come to Thalos Prime. Our defenses are gone. Our fleets are destroyed. We have maybe 3 days before they break through our last shields." Hyun-woo felt his stomach twist as he watched the alien's desperate face. He had been working as a translator for the Galactic Council for 2 years now, ever since Earth joined this vast community of worlds. He had seen many emergency calls, but nothing like this. The fear in the Vellani's voice was something that went beyond words. "The Ravak are not just killing us," the officer continued, his hands shaking as he gripped his communication device. "They are eating our people. They feed on our terror. Our children cry in the shelters below ground, and somehow the Ravak hear those cries from space. They enjoy our pain." The transmission started to break up, but the Vellani kept talking. "If anyone receives this message, please remember us. Tell the galaxy that the Vellani tried to be good. We never hurt anyone. We just wanted to grow our gardens and raise our families in peace." The screen went dark. The council chambers fell, silent, except for the quiet sounds of different species breathing, clicking, and humming in their own ways. No one spoke for a long time. Ambassador Ji-hai stood up from her seat in the human section. She was a small woman with graying hair, but when she spoke, her voice carried across the entire hall. "How long do we have?" she asked. The council's military leader, a tall insect-like being called Thextar, moved his 4 arms in what Hyun-woo knew was a gesture of hopelessness. "The Ravak move fast once they start feeding," Thextar said in his clicking voice. "If the Vellani shields fall, every living thing on that world will be gone in hours." "What about our fleets?" asked another council member. "Surely we can send help." Thextar's mandibles clicked together sadly. "We have already tried. 3 times we sent our combined forces against the Ravak Empire. 3 times they destroyed us. The Ravak ships are alive, you see. They heal themselves. They learn from each battle. And worst of all, they make our own people fight for them after they capture them." Ji-hai looked around the council chambers. She saw fear in every face, on every alien feature. Some species were already moving toward the exits, probably to send word to their homeworlds to prepare defenses. Others sat frozen in their seats, too scared to move. "There must be something we can do," Ji-hai said firmly. "We cannot just let an entire world die." "The humans are still new here," said a voice from across the hall. It belonged to Zethral, a proud reptilian being whose people had been in the council for thousands of years. "Perhaps they do not understand. The Ravak Empire has been growing for centuries. They have eaten dozens of worlds. Hundreds of billions of people have died in their ships. There is no fighting them. There is only running and hoping they choose someone else." Hyun-woo watched his ambassador's face carefully. He had learned to read human expressions during his time working with them. Ji-hai was not afraid. She was angry, very angry. "Contact Earth," Ji-hai said quietly. "Send them everything we know about the Ravak Empire and the situation at Thalos Prime." "Ambassador," Thextar said, his voice gentle but firm. "Your people have been in space for less than 50 years. You have no experience with threats like this. Perhaps it would be better to focus on defending Earth itself." Ji-hai smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Hyun-woo had seen that expression before, usually right before humans did something that surprised everyone. You asked for help. We will give it. The message went out on the fastest channels available. Within hours, a response came back from Earth. Hyun-woo was the one who received it and translated it for the Council. The message was short and came from someone called Admiral Tae-min. Request received. Response approved. Departure in 6 hours. Arrival in 4 days. Earth sends its regards. Many council members laughed when they heard this. Some even made jokes about the foolish humans who thought they could fight where others had failed. But Hyun-woo noticed that Ji-hai did not laugh. She just nodded and began gathering her things. "What kind of force is Earth sending?" asked Zethral with amusement in his voice. "A few of your primitive ships? Some of your chemical rockets?" "I do not know," Ji-hai answered honestly. "But I know this. When someone asks Earth for help, they get more than they asked for." As the council meeting ended, and the various species returned to their ships and their worlds, Hyun-woo stayed behind to speak with his ambassador. "Do you really think we can help?" he asked in Korean, glad to speak his native language after hours of translation work. Ji-hai looked at the dark screen where the Vellani officer's face had been. "The Ravak Empire thinks it knows what fear is," she said quietly. "They think they are the scariest things in the galaxy, but they have never met humans who are protecting someone they care about." She paused and looked at Hyun-woo with that same dangerous smile. "They are about to learn that there is something much worse than a monster that hunts for food. They are about to meet monsters that hunt for justice. Far across the galaxy, on a blue and green world that most aliens still considered young and primitive, Admiral Tae-min stood on the bridge of humanity's newest warship. The UES Vengeance was not the biggest ship in Earth's fleet, but it was the fastest and the most deadly. Around it, dozens of other human ships prepared for a journey that would change everything. Captain So-jin received her orders with the same calm expression that all Earth military officers wore before battle. Her crew of Marines, led by the tough Sergeant Dong-hyun, loaded weapons that no alien species had ever seen before. As the human fleet left Earth's orbit and jumped into hyperspace, heading toward a distant world under attack, one thought echoed. Through every human mind, someone had asked Earth for help. Now they would see what help really looked like. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Thelos Prime system, and what they saw made even the most experienced soldiers stop and stare. Captain So-jin stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the main screen with cold eyes as the horror unfolded before them. Thousands of ships surrounded the green and blue world like a disease. But these were not ships as humans understood them. They were alive. Each vessel pulsed with organic movement, their hulls breathing like the skin of some massive creature. Some were small, no bigger than human fighters, while others stretched. For kilometers, their surfaces covered in what looked like teeth and eyes. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Kang Ho from his position at the sensor station. "Those things are actually alive." Commander Jae-sung stepped up beside So-jin, his face grim as he studied the readings. The biosignatures are off the charts. Each ship is reading as a single massive life form. And look at this. He pointed to a cluster of data on his screen. They're connected. All of them. Like they share the same mind. Around the dying planet, the remains of the Vellani defense fleet huddled behind energy shields that flickered and sparked with each impact from the Ravak weapons. So-jin could see that maybe 20 Vellani ships remained out of what had probably been hundreds. They stayed close to their world, too afraid to venture out into space where the living ships waited like hungry wolves. "Captain," called out Ensign Hae-jin from communications. "I'm receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's the same Vellani officer who sent the distress call." The main screen changed to show the blue-skinned alien, but he looked much worse than before. His uniform was torn, and one of his 4 eyes was swollen shut. Behind him, So-jin could see other Vellani running back and forth in panic. Human ships. the Volani officer said, his voice filled with disbelief. "You actually came. I am Commander Veltar of the Volani Republic Defense Force. What remains of it anyway?" "This is Captain Sojin of the Earthship Vengeance," she replied calmly. "We received your distress call. What is your current situation?" Veltar let out a sound that might have been a laugh, but it held no humor. "Our situation is hopeless. The Ravak have been feeding on us for 6 days now. Every time we try to fight back, they capture our people and turn them into things. Living weapons that fight for them." Sojin watched as several Ravak bioships moved closer to the planet. As they approached, the remaining Volani ships pulled back even further, clearly terrified. "Tell me about their tactics," she said. "Tactics?" Veltar's remaining eyes went wide. "They don't have tactics. They just come at you and keep coming. But it's not the dying that breaks you. It's the fear. When they get close to your ship, you start hearing things. Voices of people you knew who are already dead. Screams that seem to come from inside your own head. Some of my officers went mad just from being near them." Jae-sung leaned forward. "Psychological warfare. They use fear as a weapon." "It's more than that," Veltar continued. "The ships themselves eat fear. They get stronger when their enemies are scared. The more afraid you are, the more powerful they become. That's why no one has ever beaten them. Everyone who fights the Ravak eventually breaks." Sojin nodded slowly. Around her, the bridge crew listened to every word. She could see some tension in their faces, but not fear. Humans had learned long ago to control their fear, to use it instead of being used by it. "How many ships do they have in this system?" she asked. "We counted over 3,000 when they first arrived. More keep coming every day, and each one is different. Some are fighters, some are carriers full of smaller creatures. The biggest ones can swallow our largest ships whole." As if summoned by his words, one of the massive Ravak bioships moved toward the human fleet. It was easily 5 times the size of the Vengeance, its surface covered in what looked like mouths lined with sharp teeth. As it approached, strange sounds began to come through the communication system. At first, it sounded like static. Then it became whispers in languages that no human had ever heard. Finally, it turned into screams of pure terror and pain. Several of the younger crew members looked uncomfortable, but no one panicked. "Interesting," Sojin said calmly. "Jae-sung, are you getting readings on whatever they're doing to create that effect?" "Yes, Captain. Some kind of psychic transmission. It's designed to trigger fear responses in most species. But..." He paused and looked at his instruments with surprise. "It's not working on us the way it should. Our brain chemistry is different enough that we're largely immune." The Ravak ship seemed to sense that its fear weapon was not working. It moved closer, and now they could see smaller creatures moving along its hull. They looked like a cross between insects and sea creatures, with too many legs and eyes that glowed in the darkness of space. "Captain Sojin," Veltar said urgently, "you need to retreat now. Once they target you, there's no escape. Please, save your people. Don't let Earth suffer the same fate as my world." Sojin smiled, and it was not a gentle expression. "Commander Veltar, I appreciate your concern. But you called for help, and Earth always answers when someone needs help." She turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to Admiral Taemin on the flagship. Tell him we have visual contact with the enemy force. Request permission to begin rescue operations." The response came back immediately. "Permission granted. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Protect the innocent by any means necessary." Sojin felt a familiar calm settle over her, the same feeling she had experienced in every battle of her career. Around her, the bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, each person knowing exactly what to do. "Jae-sung, I want full tactical analysis of those bioships. Find their weak points. Hae-jin, contact Marine Lieutenant Bo-ra. Tell her to prepare her boarding teams for rescue operations. Kang-ho, charge all weapons systems and raise shields." As the human ships began to spread out into battle formation, something strange happened. The Ravak ships, which had been moving, with confidence toward this new prey, suddenly slowed down. It was as if they sensed something different about these newcomers. "Captain," Jae-sung reported, "I'm reading confusion in their biosignatures. They seem uncertain." On the planet below, Veltar watched in amazement as the human ships moved toward the Ravak force instead of running away. "They're not afraid," he whispered to his crew. "These humans are not afraid at all." One of his officers, a young Vellani female named Kira, looked up from her sensor readings. "Commander, the human ships are small compared to the Ravak fleet. They only have about 50 vessels." "I know," Veltar said quietly, "but look at the way they move. Look at the way they form up for battle. These are not the actions of a species that runs from fights." High above the planet, the first human ship made contact with a Ravak biovessel. The alien creature tried to wrap its living arms around the human ship, probably expecting it to stop and surrender like so many others had done before. Instead, the human ship opened fire. The weapons that struck the Ravak bio ship were unlike anything the creature had ever experienced. Railgun slugs, moving at incredible speeds, punched through its organic armor like it was paper. Plasma beams burned away huge sections of its hull. Fusion missiles exploded against its surface, each blast calculated for maximum damage. The bioship screamed, not just with sound, but with psychic energy that made every living thing in the system feel its pain and surprise. It had expected fear and surrender. Instead, it found violence and precision. More human ships joined the attack. Each one moved with deadly purpose, their weapons firing in coordinated patterns that showed years of training and experience. The Ravak creature tried to heal itself, as its kind always did, but the humans kept firing until there was nothing left but drifting pieces of organic matter. Across the Ravak fleet, confusion spread like wildfire. For the first time in centuries, they had encountered a species that fought back without fear, that killed efficiently and without mercy. On the planet below, Veltar and his people watched in silent amazement as the human fleet began its work. They had called for rescue, hoping for evacuation ships or maybe a diplomatic solution. Instead, Earth had sent them something much more dangerous. Human beings who had decided that the Ravak Empire needed to learn what happens when they threaten innocent people. The Ravak bio fleet moved like a living storm toward the human ships, expecting another easy victory. They had destroyed countless worlds, using the same tactics that had never failed them before. First, they would spread fear through their psychic attacks. Then they would capture some enemy ships to turn their crews into living weapons. Finally, they would feed on the terror of the survivors while consuming everything else. But something was wrong. The human ships were not running away or begging for mercy. Instead, they were spreading out into what looked like hunting patterns. Captain Minho strapped himself into the cockpit of his fighter craft, leading the squadron called Ghost Wing. Around him, 24 other human pilots prepared for launch. From the carrier UES Retribution. Each pilot had trained for years in Earth's most dangerous combat simulations, but this would be their first real battle against alien enemies. "Ghost Wing, this is Ghost Leader," Minho said into his communication system. "Remember your training. These bioships use fear as a weapon, but fear only works if you let it. We are not here to be afraid. We are here to hunt." The fighters launched from their carrier like bullets from a gun, moving at speeds that made the Ravak bioships pause in confusion. Human technology was different from anything they had encountered before. Where other species built ships to be safe and comfortable, humans built them to be fast and deadly. As Ghostwing approached the first group of enemy bioships, the Ravak creatures began their psychic attack. Horrible images filled the minds of the human pilots. They saw their families dying, their homeworld burning, their own bodies being torn apart by alien claws. But the humans had trained for this. On Earth, military pilots learned to fight through fear, pain, and confusion. They practiced flying while experiencing the worst things the human mind could imagine. The Ravak attack was powerful, but it was not worse than what these pilots had already faced in their own training. Ghost 2. "I'm seeing some kind of mental attack," reported Lieutenant Yunji, Minho's wingman. "But it's not affecting my systems. Just ignore it and focus on targets." "Copy that, Ghost 2, Minho replied. "All units, ignore the noise in your heads. Focus on what you can see with your eyes." The human fighters dove into the Ravak formation, like wolves attacking a herd of sheep. Their weapons were small compared to the bioships, but they were precise. Each shot was aimed at specific weak points that human computers had identified during the first attack. The bioships tried to catch the fighters with their living tentacles and mouth-like weapons, but the humans were too fast and too smart. They used tactics that no other species had ever tried against the Ravak. Instead of fighting like ships in space, they fought like predators on the hunt. Aboard the UES Vengeance, Captain Sojin watched the battle with calm satisfaction. Her main screen showed dozens of fighter craft dancing around the massive bioships, striking like hornets and disappearing before the creatures could react. "Jae-sung, what's the status on our main gun batteries?" she asked. Commander Jae-sung checked his readings. "All weapons charged and ready, Captain. We have target locks on 12 bioships in the middle formation." Fire when ready. The Vengeance opened up with everything it had. Railgun rounds moving at 3% of light. Speed smashed through organic armor that had never been designed to stop kinetic weapons. Plasma beams heated to the temperature of stars burned away huge sections of bioship hulls. Fusion missiles exploded in carefully timed sequences that maximized damage. But the humans were not just using brute force. They were learning. Each shot was recorded and analyzed by computer systems that calculated the best way to kill these living ships. When one weapon did not work well, they tried another. When they found something that worked, they used it again and again. The first bioship died screaming, its psychic death cry echoing across the battlefield. The sound would have driven most species insane with terror, but the humans barely noticed it. They were too busy killing the next target. Sergeant Dong Hyun led his Marine boarding team onto the first Ravak ship that the fleet managed to disable instead of destroy. His job was to rescue any prisoners and gather intelligence about how these creatures fought. The inside of the bioship was like walking through the stomach of some giant monster. The walls pulsed with life, and the air was thick with a smell that reminded Dong Hyun of rotting meat. Strange sounds echoed through the corridors, and shadows moved in places where there should have been nothing. "Stay together," Dong Hyun told his squad through their helmet radios. "Watch your corners and remember that everything in here is alive and probably wants to kill us." The Marines moved through the ship with the same careful precision they had learned in training. Each doorway was cleared before they moved through it. Each corridor was checked for traps or enemies. They had trained for urban combat on Earth, fighting in cities full of human enemies who knew every trick of war. This was different, but not harder. They found the prisoner holding area deep in the ship's center. What they saw there made even the toughest Marines feel sick. Dozens of aliens from different species hung in organic pods that kept them alive while slowly changing them into something else. Some had already grown new arms or legs. Others had extra eyes or mouths in the wrong places. "Get them out of there," Dong Hyun ordered. "Cut them loose and get them back to the ship." As his team worked to free the prisoners, Dong Hyun explored deeper into the bioship. He wanted to understand how these creatures thought, how they fought, how they could be killed more efficiently. What he found surprised him. The bioships were not just alive, they were intelligent. Each one was like a giant brain that controlled smaller creatures inside it. But they were not very smart individually. They relied on their connection to the rest of the fleet to make complex decisions. "Captain Sojin," Dong Hyun reported over the radio, "I think I found a weakness. These ships are like a hive mind. If we can disrupt their communications with each other, they might become much easier to fight. Back on the bridge of the Vengeance, So-Jin smiled as she received the report. This was exactly the kind of information that humans were good at using. Jae-sung, can we jam their communications? Working on it now, Captain. I think we can create interference that will break their psychic connections. As the human fleet continued its attack, the Ravak began to realize that they were in serious trouble. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they were losing a battle. Ships that had never been hurt before were dying. Creatures that had lived for hundreds of years were being destroyed by weapons they had never seen. Worse, the humans were not just fighting, they were learning. Each dead bioship taught them something new about how to kill the next one. Each successful attack was shared with the entire human fleet instantly, making all of them more dangerous. The Ravak tried to retreat, pulling back, toward the outer edge of the system where they could regroup and call for help. But the humans followed them like hunting dogs chasing wounded prey. "Ghost Leader to all units," Minho called out as his fighters pursued the fleeing bioships. "Don't let them escape. If even one of these things gets away, it might bring back more." Lieutenant Bo-Ra led another Marine team onto a Vellani ship that had been damaged in the fighting. Her job was to evacuate civilians and wounded defenders. What she found there taught her something important about why humans were winning this battle. The Vellani survivors huddled in their damaged ship like frightened children. They had been fighting the Ravak for days, but they were fighting like prey animals, always running, always afraid. When Bo-Ra and her Marines arrived, the aliens could barely believe that anyone would voluntarily board a ship so close to the Ravak fleet. "How are you not afraid?" asked a young Vellani officer named Kira. "The Ravak get stronger when their enemies are scared. Everyone knows that. How do you fight them without feeling fear?" Bo-Ra helped the wounded alien stand up, supporting her with a strong arm. "We do feel fear," she said honestly. "But we learned long ago that being afraid and being defeated are not the same thing. Fear can make you careful. It can make you think faster, but only if you control it, instead of letting it control you." "But how do you control something like that?" Bo-Ra looked out through the ship's window at the battle raging in space. Human ships danced between the massive biovessels like deadly insects, striking again and again with perfect coordination. "We practice," she said simply. "Every human learns to fight through fear from the time they are children. We tell stories about people who were afraid but fought anyway. We train our soldiers to keep thinking, even when they are terrified, fear is just another enemy to defeat." As the battle continued, the Ravak fleet began to break apart. Ships that had fought together for centuries started making mistakes, taking unnecessary risks, fleeing in random directions. The humans had successfully disrupted their communications, turning a coordinated swarm into a collection of confused individual creatures. Admiral Taemin watched the tactical display from his flagship and felt a quiet satisfaction. This was what humans did best. 3 days after the first battle, the Ravak reinforcements arrived expecting to find a conquered system and fresh feeding grounds. Instead, they dropped out of hyperspace to discover human patrol ships circling the debris of their advance fleet like sharks in bloody water. The rescue fleet was massive, 10 times larger than the force that had been destroyed. At its center rode the command ships of the Ravak Empire itself, ancient biovessels the size of small moons, creatures that had lived for thousands of years and devoured entire star systems. They had come not just to feed on Thalos Prime, but to discover what had dared to challenge their dominance. Admiral Taemin stood in the command center of the UES Retribution, studying the tactical display with the calm expression that had made him famous throughout Earth's military. Around him, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency, their voices steady despite the enormous enemy force approaching their position. "Sir," reported Commander Park, the fleet intelligence officer, We're reading biosignatures unlike anything we encountered in the first wave. These ships are not just alive. They're ancient. Some of them show evolutionary patterns that suggest they've been growing and adapting for millennia. Taemin nodded slowly. This was what he had expected. The first Ravok force had been scouts and advance feeders. Now the real power of their empire had come to see what had killed their children. Communications, he said quietly. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we need the Hellbringer packages. The response came back within minutes, transmitted across the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds. Hellbringer deployment authorized. They are already en route. Estimated arrival in 18 hours. Around the command center, officers exchanged glances. The Hellbringer-class destroyers were Earth's most classified weapons, ships that carried technologies so dangerous that their existence was known only to the highest levels of human military command. They had never been used in actual combat before. Commander Yunji received her orders while piloting one of the smaller human ships on the outer edge of the patrol formation. She had been chosen to command the first Hellbringer when it arrived, an honor that came with terrible responsibility. The Hellbringer-class ships looked different from other human vessels. Where most Earth military craft were built for speed and efficiency, the Hellbringers were designed for one purpose, to make sure that when humans went to war, their enemies understood they had made a fatal mistake. As the massive Ravok fleet approached Thalos Prime, something strange began to happen. The bioships that had expected to find terror and easy prey instead encountered something they had never experienced before. Organized, intelligent resistance that seemed to have no fear at all. The human fleet was small compared to the Ravok reinforcements, but it moved with a precision that the organic ships could not match. Every human vessel knew exactly where it needed to be and what it needed to do. They had spent the last 3 days studying every piece of debris from the first battle, learning everything they could about Ravok biology and tactics. All units, Admiral Taemin's voice came over the fleet communication system. Remember that we are not just fighting to win this battle. We are fighting to ensure that the Ravok Empire never threatens innocent people again. Make every shot count. The second battle began not with the chaotic swarm tactics that the Ravok preferred, but with a careful, coordinated assault by human forces that had learned from their first encounter. This time, they knew exactly where to hit the bioships to cause maximum damage. Commander Jae-sung had spent hours analyzing the remains of destroyed Ravok vessels, mapping their internal structures and identifying critical systems. Now he put that knowledge to use, directing the human fleet's weapons with surgical precision. Target the neural clusters first, he advised over the tactical network. Each bioship has several brain centers. Destroy those, and the ship loses coordination even if it's still alive. Focus plasma fire on the feeding ports, added Captain Sojin from the Vengeance. They use those openings to absorb energy from their victims. Seal them shut and the ship starts starving immediately. Railgun strikes work best on the propulsion organs, reported another ship captain. They can't run away if they can't move. As the battle developed, it became clear that the humans were not fighting the same way as other species. Where most civilizations relied on superior numbers or better technology, the humans used something much more dangerous: intelligence and adaptability. Every time the Ravok tried a new tactic, the humans countered it within minutes. When the bioships attempted to use their psychic fear attacks, human crews simply ignored them and kept fighting. When the Ravok tried to swarm individual human vessels, they found themselves trapped in carefully planned kill zones where multiple human ships could concentrate their fire. Medical Officer Hae-won worked in the medical bay of the Vengeance, treating wounded Vellani civilians who had been rescued from the Ravok ships. As she worked to heal their injuries and reverse the biological changes the Ravok had inflicted on them, she explained to them what made humans different. "We evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill us," she said as she administered medicine to a young Vellani child who had grown extra arms during his captivity. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, diseases, predators, and eventually our own species. We learned to survive by being smarter than our enemies. not stronger. The child looked up at her with eyes that were still wide with fear from his experience on the Ravak ship. "But how do you fight without being afraid?" he asked in his broken understanding of human language. HFY smiled gently as she checked his vital signs. "We are afraid, but we learned something important long ago. Being afraid of something and being defeated by it are not the same thing. Fear can make you careful. It can make you think faster, but only if you use it as a tool instead of letting it control you." Outside the medical bay, the battle continued with increasing intensity. The Ravak command creatures, ancient beings that had orchestrated the consumption of countless worlds, began to realize they were facing something unprecedented. For the first time in their long existence, they encountered a species that fought back not just with weapons, but with intelligence and determination. The turning point came when Commander Yunji arrived with the first Hellbringer destroyer. The ship dropped out of hyperspace directly in the center of the Ravak formation, its weapons already charging for firing. The Hellbringer looked like death itself, given physical form. Its hull was black as space, covered with weapon systems that had been designed not just to destroy enemy ships, but to send a message to anyone who might consider threatening Earth or its allies in the future. "This is Commander Yunji." Her voice came over the communication system. "All human ships, pull back to minimum safe distance. We are about to demonstrate why Earth is now considered the apex predator species in this galaxy. The weapons that the Hellbringer fired were unlike anything the Ravak had ever encountered. Quantum disruptors tore apart the molecular bonds that held the bioships together. Gravitational weapons created miniature black holes that consumed entire sections of the organic fleet. Temporal distortion fields slowed down enemy ships while allowing human weapons to strike at normal speed. But the most terrifying weapon was not technological at all. It was psychological. As the Hellbringer worked its way through the Ravak fleet, destroying ships that had been considered immortal, it broadcast a simple message on all frequencies. "This is Earth," the message said in every language known to the galaxy. "We came to help. We stayed to hunt. Anyone who threatens innocent people will face the same fate as these creatures. We are not here to conquer. We are here to protect. But protection sometimes requires extinction." The ancient Ravak command creatures, beings that had lived for millennia and consumed entire civilizations, felt something they had never experienced before: true terror. They were not afraid of dying. They had accepted that risk long ago. They were afraid of being completely outmatched by a species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers. As their fleet died around them, the surviving Ravak began to understand a horrible truth. They had not encountered another prey species that could be easily conquered. They had met the galaxy's new apex predators, and those predators had decided that the Ravak Empire was a threat that needed to be eliminated. The battle continued for hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The human fleet moved through. The Ravak forces like a pack of wolves hunting diseased animals, efficient and merciless. Each destroyed bioship sent a message through the Ravak collective consciousness. Earth had come to end their reign of terror. On the surface of Thalos Prime, Commander Veltar and his people watched the lights in their sky as the human fleet systematically destroyed an enemy that had seemed invincible just days before. The Villani had called for rescue, hoping for evacuation ships or diplomatic protection. Instead, Earth had sent them something much more effective: the promise that the Ravak Empire would never threaten anyone again. As the last of the reinforcement, fleet died in the cold vacuum of space, Admiral Taemin prepared for the final phase of humanity's response to the galaxy's cry for help. The final Ravak stronghold was not a planet or a space station, but a living creature the size of a small moon. It had been growing in the darkness between stars for thousands of years, consuming entire fleets and civilizations to fuel its expansion. Now it hung in space like a diseased heart, pulsing with malevolent life as it coordinated the remaining fragments of the Ravak Empire. Captain So-Jin stood in the shuttle bay of the UES Vengeance, watching her Marines prepare for what would be the most dangerous mission of the war. They were going to board the creature that served as the Ravak command center and end this threat once and for all. "Remember," she told the assembled soldiers, "this thing has been alive for millennia. It has eaten entire worlds. Inside, we'll face everything the Ravak Empire has learned about killing and terror. But we have something it has never encountered before." Sergeant Dong-hyun checked his weapon one final time and looked up at his captain. "What's that, ma'am?" So-Jin smiled with the cold expression that had become famous throughout the human fleet. "We have the absolute determination to make sure this thing never hurts anyone again." The boarding shuttles launched from a dozen human ships simultaneously, carrying the best soldiers Earth had ever produced into the heart of enemy territory. As they approached the massive bio-creature, its surface began to change, opening wounds that revealed defensive weapons and releasing clouds of smaller organisms designed to attack the approaching vessels. But the humans had learned much during their battles with the Ravak fleet. Their shuttles were equipped with shields designed specifically to counter biological weapons. Their armor was sealed against toxins and acids. Most importantly, their minds were prepared for the psychological assault that was about to begin. As soon as the shuttles pierced the creature's outer skin, the real attack started. Every human soldier suddenly experienced visions of their worst fears made real. They saw their families dying, their homeworld burning, their own bodies being consumed by alien parasites. But they kept moving. Human military training had prepared them for exactly this situation. On Earth, soldiers learned to function while experiencing the worst things the human imagination could create. The Ravak creature's mental attacks were powerful, but they were not worse than what these Marines had already survived in their own training. Dong-hyun led the first squad through corridors that pulsed with organic life. The walls breathed around them, and strange sounds echoed from the darkness ahead. His men moved with the careful precision they had learned in urban combat training, but adapted for an environment unlike anything on Earth. "Movement ahead," reported Corporal Min-soo, his voice steady despite the horror surrounding them. "Multiple contacts, all biosignatures." The Ravak defenders were not like the ship creatures the humans had fought in space. These were the pure form of the species, beings that had never needed mechanical technology because they were living weapons. They moved like liquid death through the organic corridors, their bodies changing shape as needed to attack or defend. The firefight that followed was unlike anything in military history. Human weapons designed to kill mechanical enemies faced living creatures that could heal from almost any wound, but the humans adapted, as they always did. Instead of trying to kill the Ravak defenders immediately, they focused on disabling them, cutting off their connections to the creature's central nervous system. Deeper in the bioship, So-Jin led another team toward what their sensors indicated was the command center. As they moved through the living corridors, she explained to her soldiers what they were really fighting for. "This isn't just about saving Thalos Prime," she said, as they carefully advanced through an area that looked like the inside of a giant lung. "This is about making sure that the galaxy understands what happens when someone threatens innocent people and Earth finds out about it." They found the Ravak leadership in a chamber that looked like the inside of a massive brain. Dozens of ancient creatures hung in organic pods, their minds connected to the ship creature's central consciousness. These were the beings that had orchestrated the consumption of entire worlds, the planners behind centuries of galactic terror. When the humans entered their chamber, the Ravak leaders tried one final psychological attack. They projected images of every world they had consumed, every species they had destroyed, every life they had ended in their long reign of terror. The mental assault was designed to break the minds of anyone who witnessed the true scope of their crimes. Instead, it made the humans angrier. "You made a mistake," So-Jin said calmly as her soldiers surrounded the ancient creatures. "You thought showing us your victims would make us afraid. Instead, you showed us exactly why you need to die." The final battle was not a firefight or an explosion. It was a choice. The surviving Ravak leaders, creatures that had lived for thousands of years and consumed billions of lives, found themselves faced with an ultimatum delivered by a human soldier who spoke with the quiet authority of Earth itself. "Withdraw to your home system," Dong Hyun told them, his weapon trained on beings that had once been the terror of the galaxy. "Stay there. Never expand again. Never hunt again. Never threaten another innocent life. Do this, and you can live quietly in your own space until the end of time." "And if we refuse?" asked the largest of the Ravak leaders, its voice echoing with the power of a creature that had never known defeat. Dong Hyun's expression did not change. "Then we demonstrate why Earth is now considered the apex predator species in this galaxy. And trust me, you do not want that demonstration." Hours later, the Galactic Council received a transmission that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Admiral Taemin's face appeared on screens throughout Council space, his expression calm as he delivered his report. "The Ravak Empire has been neutralized," he said simply. "The threat to Thalos Prime has been eliminated. All Ravak forces have withdrawn to their home system under terms that guarantee they will never expand again." Ambassador Ji Ha stood before the assembled council members, many of whom were still trying to understand what had happened. In less than 2 weeks, humanity had accomplished something that the combined fleets of dozens of species had failed to do in centuries. "How?" asked Thextar, the insect-like military commander who had declared the situation hopeless. "How did you defeat them when all of our efforts failed?" Jihai looked around the council chambers, seeing fear and respect in equal measure on the faces of beings from across the galaxy. "We did not defeat them," she said quietly. "We educated them. We taught them that there are consequences for threatening innocent people when Earth is watching." Over the following days, reports began to arrive from across the galaxy. Species that had lived in terror of the Ravak expansion were celebrating their freedom. Worlds that had prepared for evacuation were now planning festivals. Children who had learned to fear the darkness of space were being told they could sleep safely again. But the most important message came from Earth itself. Commander Veltar, the Vellani officer who had sent the original distress call, received a personal transmission from Admiral Taemin. "Commander Veltar," the human leader said, "you asked for help, and Earth responded. But I want you to understand something important. This is not just about the Ravak Empire. This is about what happens from now on." Veltar listened carefully as the human admiral continued. "From this day forward, Earth considers itself the protector of innocent species throughout this galaxy. We will patrol the space lanes. We will respond to distress calls. We will ensure that no species ever again faces the terror that yours experienced." "But why?" Veltar asked. "Why would you take on such a burden? Your people barely know us. You could have stayed safely on your own world." Taemin smiled. And for the first time, it was a warm expression instead of a cold one. "Because someone asked us for help, and humans never ignore a cry for aid. We may be new to this galaxy, but we understand something that older species seem to have forgotten." "What is that?" "That civilized beings have a responsibility to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The strong must defend the weak, not prey upon them. This is the most basic law of any truly advanced society." As the transmission ended, Veltar realized that the galaxy had changed forever. The Ravak Empire was gone, but in its place had risen something entirely new, a species of protectors who had the power to enforce their protection and the will to use that power when necessary. Across the galaxy, other species began to understand the new reality. Earth had not just answered a call for help. They had established themselves as the apex predators of civilized space. Any species that threatened innocent people would now face not just their victims' resistance, but the full might of humanity's protective instincts. The message was clear. and had been delivered in the most effective way possible, through the complete destruction of those who had ignored it. On Earth, in the halls of military command, new orders were being written and new ships were being built. Humanity had discovered its role in the galaxy, and they intended to fulfill that role with the same determination they had shown in ending the Ravok threat.